Hello, everyone. It is brilliant to be here with my favourite co-host, Mick Philippou, who's the CEO of Sandstone Technology. Now, Mick, you have got me into the habit of saying good morning, good afternoon, and good night, which is such a great pickup because we have all of you fabulous people out there tuning in from literally all different parts of the globe. So that is an excellent pickup from you, Mick. Mate, it's good to be here. And we're back, of course, with, I think, one of our favourite days of the week, which is our Digital First Banking Transformation series, with, as usual, a fabulous guest today and fabulous guests to follow.
Yeah, well, good afternoon, Alex, and I think I'll just abbreviate it to hello to all of our audience. And of course, thrilled to be back here co-hosting Digital First a Banking Transformation series with you. You obviously have a very low bar if I'm your favourite co-host, but I'll take the compliment. We say it every week, and it does feel like it just needs to be reinforced. And we have been blessed with so many wonderful guests joining us on the program thus far. And due to popular demand, we have a guest who's coming back for her second visit, as our audience, you, requested to hear more of her insight. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce today's guest. And for those of you who aren't au fait with the Chief Product Officer for Tyro Payments, I'll take you through her distinguished background. Bronwyn Yam joined Tyro in October 2017 with over 20 years' experience in financial services and consulting. And prior to joining Tyro, Bronwyn has held several senior roles across various divisions within the Commonwealth Bank of Australia since 2005. And before moving to Australia, in 2004, Bronwyn had a consulting career with Arthur Andersen Business Consulting in the US and across Asia, working with clients from multiple industries, from manufacturing to financial services. She has extensive experience in challenging the status quo and delivering on innovative processes and solutions. Bronwyn has a passion for driving transformational change to organisations and teams, leveraging on technology and disruptive thinking to deliver exceptional customer outcomes. Bronwyn, welcome back to the program. What an incredible career and experience you have, and not to mention the wonderful results that Tyro recently posted from a financial perspective. But when you think back about your career in financial services and technology, tell us why you believe it's important that leaders need to have the ability to be able to pivot.
Well, thanks, Mick and Alex. So great to be back, and hello, everyone. Look, I think pivoting as a leader is becoming an increasingly important trait for all of us to have, because things are just changing so drastically. I mean, we've all been through the challenges of the year 2020 that it's been. The pandemic has taught all of us so many things across so many aspects of our lives. And so the ability to adapt and pivot and be brave enough to try new things is increasingly important. Our customers expect us to do that because they themselves need to do that. Technology is pushing us to have to do that to survive. So it's just one of those things that we need to work into our DNA and be comfortable in our skin to be able to just pivot.
Hey, I love that you've jumped right into it, Mick. Bron, it's so great to have you back. And so for everyone listening, so literally Jaden, who, you know, controls us behind the scenes, is like, can you three stop talking before we go live? Like, this is great conversation. We were so excited to talk about this. I think this is a fantastic topic. I want to kind of bring it back a little and just say, okay, when we talk pivot, and this is for you as well, Mick, like when we say pivot, as business leaders and leaders of human beings, because I think it's one of those words that's been, you know, kind of overused for a long time. For both of you as people leaders and business leaders, like what does that entail when we say we've got to pivot, everything's pushing us that way? What do you think are kind of the essential ingredients to pivoting successfully with the context of, you know, business and people and customers?
Well, I guess I'll start first. So for me, some of the key elements is having a quiet mind to observe. And I think it is about the observation of knowing when it is time to think differently, when it is time to acknowledge that there's a possibility that the business or our team or ourselves have been kind of sucked into the vortex of the comfort of what we've achieved, thinking that, hey, continuing that momentum and continuing to deliver in that direction is going to guarantee success. And I think we need to listen to feedback, listen to our customers, observing what's happening around us in the market with competition, with technology, to really ask the question, should we continue down this path, or do we need to actually start exploring other paths? And maybe it's about decreasing resources onto the original path, because it's about hedging bets a little bit for me, pivot. So it doesn't always have to be an extreme case where we're all going left and suddenly we're all gonna, change and go right, because that may not be correct either. So it's about being able to observe. It's about being able to confront ourselves that it is time to change, because that could be very hard, because you're getting that good sense of achievement. You're seeing the numbers coming. You're seeing the trend going. And you just want to believe that that trend's going to continue. But you constantly, as leaders, need to ask, what if it doesn't? What if it starts flatlining? What if it starts plateauing? What do we need to do to have a backup? So for me, that's what pivot actually means.
Well, thanks everyone for joining the show, because that's such a good answer. I feel like that's a drop the mic moment. Mick, before, I know you've got a heap of questions that you want to ask from, but I'd love your reflection on that as well, because I know you're really passionate and experienced in this as well. I think this is a really important kind of definition for the rest of the conversation.
Look, from my side, and it's pretty rare you've turned the questions on to your co-host, but no, that's okay. Look, I loved Bronwyn's answer, and I think, as you know, I'm a major proponent for Jim Collins' good to great and great by choice, and there's a number of parts to what Bronwyn just touched on there about being able to confront the brutal facts. And so what are the facts? What are you really assessing? What's working? What's not working? And what's the empirical evidence to support the hypothesis that you have? And then to take it a step and so, yeah, and as Bronwyn said, that can be uncomfortable to say, well, actually, what we thought is not quite right, or at least our progress towards what our goal was is not quite trending the way we need to make some decisions here to correct course. And it's not about doing a 360 or a 180 per se. It's about firing bullets, not cannonballs, and bullets to be able to test your new hypothesis based on the empirical data that you have from customers, from your staff, from a range of partners that can all feed in to give you hard data to rely on to now back what your hypothesis is, and then you test it. You test it with firing bullets, not going all-out war on research and development from a product perspective. And once you've got a little bit of traction, then going deep in behind it and being very, very focused and backing it with a plan. So I think the first step is confronting the brutal facts and not being scared to do that, and actually working through then the evidence points and making sure you've got the empirical data to support whatever decision you are going to make. And sometimes it's not just empirical data, because as we take Tyro, for example, who is a market leader in payments and done incredibly well. They are anticipating. They're trying to anticipate as well, and they're looking for offshore trends and what's best of breed around the market. So I think these are the things: confront the brutal facts, have empirical evidence to back your hypothesis, and then fire bullets, not cannonballs.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good angle on the confronting the truths. And I want to bring in almost the psychological and the emotional readiness that you have to with that. So it is uncomfortable. So people needs to be okay with that. But at the same time, I think many times people link that brutal truth, or if the numbers aren't going well or the trend isn't as expected, they immediately link that to we've done something wrong. Yeah. And I think that may not necessarily be the conducive mindset that you need to have when you're determining how to pivot or whether you need to pivot. Because it's not about right or wrong. Because when you had made the decision originally, months ago, years ago, that could be the best evidence that you had at hand at that point in time, so that was the right decision. And we have to recognize that things do change. And so it's about not letting your ego in the way to always feel like it's damaged because it's something wrong, and that's why you have to pivot. Pivot doesn't mean that something went wrong. Pivot just means that something new's come about, that is new information that you've got, and it's about looking forward and creating those opportunities and those options to explore and improve and do something even better and greater for your customers and for your team and for your company.
That's wonderful.
Go, Mick, go.
I was going to say, no, that's a wonderful reflection and insight in terms of being probably to the next question. How do you make sure, you're right, how do you make sure it's not a win-loss or it's failure, success mindset, and you've got a culture where people feel that it's not a poor reflection if something has gone wrong? Because as you say, now there's new information at hand which needs to be considered that you did not have previously, and you could only rely on a certain amount of information 12 months, 24 months ago. How do you build that culture within your teams to be able to confront the brutal facts without fear of retribution or judgment or failure? How do you foster that platform?
I think, it's back to your point around, constantly having the empirical evidence and being comfortable to talk about the facts and where does that mean and how does it translate to the measure of or the metric that we're measuring ourselves against. And I think it's also, as a leader, very important to actually acknowledge very transparently to your team that, these are the reasons why we did certain things before, and these are the things that we're observing now, and this is why we've got new hypotheses or new directions that we want to explore. And it's talking about it quite persistently to the team. And there's nothing wrong with highlighting to the team that if there are chances whereby, yes, something did go wrong and that it is a failure, then it's about focusing on the learnings from that failure, but it's also owning it as a leader. And I feel that and find that as you own it and you talk to the team about it, everyone is human, right? All of us have our vulnerabilities and we need to be comfortable to share that. That actually gain, I feel, the respect of your team, and it really role models for them that it is okay to talk about something that hasn't worked well. It is okay to suggest a way that we need to pivot. No idea is a dumb idea. No question is a stupid question. And these are all the things that we just need to be mindful about. It's really interesting because I've been exploring this with my leadership team of late. And, we're trying to figure out, are there things that we're actually doing as leaders that may not be fostering as much of an honest and, open conversation that we want the team to feel that they've got that safety zone. Because we as leaders always believe, of course, we're fostering a very comfortable environment for our team to raise whatever they want. But we need to observe and listen on whether our teams are behaving the way that we expect them to. And where we came to the conclusion is that sometimes it could be, even down to our facial reaction. It's down to our body language. Like, are we leaning in? Are we leaning out? And those are the signs that our teams may read and say, well, if Bron's leaning out, that means she's not interested. That means that I've probably said something wrong. And we have to break all of those assumptions and interpretations of these silent languages that we all display, but be okay to talk about it with the team. That's how I feel you can build and recreate and foster a positive culture. That openness to talk, that platform for everyone to have a voice, and then everyone else also pays attention and listen.
Now, I just leaned in and out, and that's not because I'm a gripped, but I've just got a bit of a crook back, so I constantly adjust. So please don't read into it any other way. Over to you, Alex.
I'm leaning right into the screen. Do you know, I love that the three of us are talking about this, because we were sort of joking at the start, weren't we? These conversations, as you all give us feedback, they are quite organic, and I think that's what makes them so powerful, because we talk about whatever's coming up, but between the two of you, and I'm going to resist treating you as a guest, Mick, because you're such an experienced leader. I want to go now, Mick, I'd love to know your thoughts on this. So I'll get out of interviewing Mick mode. But I think there are some really big themes that we're already raising, which I think are super important. And for all of you out there watching, remember, you can actually put in questions. So we're happy to take questions, and we'll make sure we do those if you have any. There's a few things that, Bron, as well, you've just touched on. This theme of anticipating where to next. I want to come back to that, because for me, that's very much, I think it is about leadership and, what you're talking about, consistent and transparent communication, really realizing the impact as leaders that we have, even when it's not our intention to, people are always watching and interpreting. How do we define failure. And I think as leaders, we have the power and the opportunity to say, well, that's actually not failure, but what have we learned? Everything you've said just resonates so strongly. The question I want to ask you is, so when as a leader, things are moving so fast, we're in the new world that we're in terms of, we were chatting before about hybrid teams, and part of our team's going to be virtual and some are in the office and everything else. How do we anticipate and look for new information when we've set a vision and a strategy? Because I feel like, especially a lot of leaders who are maybe coming up through the ranks and aren't as experienced, I remember feeling like, well, I've said this is the strategy, therefore I've got to stick to it doggedly, because we can't keep chopping and changing. And what you're both saying is exactly right, is that actually part of that leadership role is, yes, having that North Star, knowing where you want to get to, knowing the inputs, but you're constantly reassessing and evaluating and taking in new information. How do you, Bron, how do you start to develop that sense of anticipating and kind of testing, and yes, using data, but also all the other inputs that I know that you and the team would be getting from the market, from your customers, from your staff? Like, how, for leaders listening, how do you start to develop that, not chopping and changing every 2 minutes, but still listening and seeing to pivot where you have to?
Yeah. So I think the first one is there needs to be alignment in the way that the team or the tribe think about or defining chopping and changing. I think that alignment up front is very important, because there are some team members who may be very used to, you tell me what to do, here are the 10 steps, I'll follow that 10 steps. And if at step number 8 you say, no, don't do step number 9 now, start over here and do step number 1 again, they may define that as, oh my God, you've just chopped and changed what I needed to do. Whereas others will feel, okay, yep, we've gone to step number 8, we've learned, I get you why we're not doing step number 9, and I get why we're starting over here in step number 1. So I think that almost like the playbook of the team of even defining what is, stopping, chopping, changing direction is important. And I think depending on the industry that you're in, or depending on the tech that you're working with, or the transformation that you're aiming to go, defining the North Star is also important. And I think as a new leader coming in, looking at how do I articulate a strategy? There are a school of thought where strategy should be blue sky, should be up here, should be where you aspire to. And it's almost sensing like you will never get there. Then for those type of leaders that are defining that type of strategy, the challenge will become, how does the team actually even think about step 1 towards that direction? Then the other side of the pendulum would be leaders that may be defining what I would say may not be strategy, but just a set of goals. And sometimes leaders are very good in defining a set of metricated goals. So it's kind of like, hey, we're going to do 500 million by year 3. Then everyone's kind of like, oh, we need to get $500 million by year 3. And then that's too set of a direction where you feel like I haven't been given the opportunity to challenge or pivot. So the balancing of what is that North Star as a direction is important. And as you were just kind of asking the question, and imagery comes to mind, it's because my son was watching Amazing Race 2 nights ago. I feel like this is almost like an amazing race. You want to get to the finish line, but you don't know exactly where that finish line is for the series this year. And it's actually taking those cards and observing what's happening to your competitors. When you've got the choice to, I don't know, I think they've got the fast track or the traditional, whatever those choices that they make onto the show. That's not different to how we run a business and a team, because we have to spot what's happening. We need to understand where we are in the race. We need to understand, what are our strengths, and thus what choices we make to ultimately get to the direction of where we know is possibly where the finish line is. So I think those are all the elements that becomes very important. And as a leader, we need to be comfortable that there will be uncertainty. We need to own it, and we need to say to the team that it's not as simple as going from A to B. We may have to go up a little bit, we may have to go down a little bit, we may have to look back a little bit before we can go forward. And I think it's acknowledging that that's going to be the journey ahead should hopefully provide some boundary of how the team understands and expect that they need to be responding and collaborating.
So much there.
Yeah, no, wonderful insight and a terrific topic. And you talked about, the different styles of the way leaders may set strategy and organisations, the way they do that, and vision. Let's call it North Star as a crude analogy. Mission and purpose, what you're there to do, and why you are what you are as an organisation. And then goals, what are the KPIs to know that you've been successful against your strategic pillars? What would you say, and what advice do you give to your teams when you're contemplating different styles of leaders, ones that are more blue sky in terms of orientation, less about perhaps some tangible metrics or some precise science that would back the destination that you're getting there, and perhaps looking up Everest, versus those that are a bit more pragmatic, so to speak, less about the blue sky and more about steps along the way and smaller milestones, but look more like action plans, so to speak. And again, just a crude analogy, but how do you guide your teams through those different styles of leaders in terms of your leadership style, as well as that of the board and the board as the stewardship of the strategy, but the actual CEO?
Yep. So I see myself playing the role that I help to connect the dots. First, I need to understand what motivates my team, what and how they like to operate, what will actually trigger their curiosity and interest and passion to do the best that they can and contribute the best that they can to what my team is here to do, product development in the payments and banking space. So from there, then I would look at how, our whole organization is defining the strategy, the North Star. And if there could be things that I can add an element of explanation or expanding or providing some more color to why there are certain things that are documented or written down as our purpose and mission, then I am kind of that translation layer, and I'm there to connect the dots for my team. So being able to observe and adapt to the different styles of the different leaders on, the executive team to the CEO is very important. Likewise, being able to listen to the needs of my team members to help them understand how they contribute. Because I think ultimately every member of the team, every employee wants to come to work to do a damn good job, to contribute to what they're there to do. But if they don't understand the context behind why they're there, then it's jobs for the leaders to be able to make that connection. I think, having the clarity of the direction supported by some measurement that people can guide as to, are we progressing well? Are we not progressing well? And it goes back to our conversation around pivot. Maybe we want to be at 500 million by year 3, but if we haven't even hit 50 million by the end of year 1, we really need to kind of step back and look at, well, is that achievable? And if it is still achievable, what is it that we need to reflect on, that we need to change about the direction, about the market that we're going, about the niche, or about, the value proposition? So these are all the things that just kind of need to intertwine and work together, but it's about being transparent to your team on your thought process. And it's also very important to invite them as part of that thinking and that part of that dialogue, because at the end of the day, they are there to do the great job that they do that makes us all as an organization to be able to achieve those goals and get closer to that North Star. So involving them in those conversations, allowing them to ask the question, and maybe even some of them could put their hand up with an idea to say, I think it's time for us to pivot, because I think this direction is where I sense this part of the market is going. All of those things are very important elements of a leader.
It's a complex job, right? Like, this is the point. And I love that what you've said a couple of times, but I love how you just reiterated then, it's the thought process, because all of us as humans, right, it's the context of why. Like in your earlier example, I think you're saying, Bron, you know what, for some people, we're not going to do step 9 of 10, we're going to go back to 1. But it's the context. That's always what I've found. Like, people don't have to agree with you. They might not agree. That's completely fine. But it's the context setting, and that I can understand. I might not agree, but I can understand. I wanted to change or shift slightly. I wanted to pivot slightly because, I'm pretty sure when we had episode 1 with you, one of the things I remember from that is that you're so customer centric, right? Because I'm sure we were talking, one of the things that Mick and I were probably quizzing you about last time was, the inputs from customers and how do you not get too inwardly looking, and how do you, with all the great innovation that you do at Tyro, like how do you remember that this is not just us, there's people out there? And I think in part of the intro, Bron, you mentioned obviously that, customers as well as technology, as well as, the pandemic and everything else. But customer demands, like customers are being forced to pivot and change behaviours as well. So what does that look like for you and the team at Tyro this year? Has there been anything that's really fundamental where you're like, wow, we didn't see that coming from our customers, or has it been more incremental? Like, look, I'm just really keen for all our listeners to hear how you're taking all this theme of pivot and leadership and doing great work and really listening to what the market and your customers are telling you.
Yeah. So, I think last time when we were chatting, obviously we're still kind of, at the middle of the pandemic, all hoping that we'll come out of it very quickly. And, there were a lot of instances where our customers needed to change the way that they operate. Like last time we were talking about hospitality, they never needed to think about really getting serious to get onto e-commerce. And now we kind of reflect how we go about as diners and as, patrons of restaurants. We have no issue being digital, right? And then the delivery platforms where it is all via the apps has just completely taken off. Likewise, in the health space, we've talked about, telehealth and how that's actually helping, doctors to understand, at the end of your consultation, you can take payments, and that's just an e-com transaction, and that's very specific to payments, but it's, about them pivoting their model. And so it's about being mindful of these types of trends. And I think the next thing that we're seeing is, because of the way that we've been using, for example, QR codes, especially in New South Wales, Services New South Wales now pretty much issue a QR code for all businesses. And as we go to every, venue, we scan, we check in, and it's just second nature. Almost like you walk in and then immediately you look for that QR code. So these are the types of technology trends that was not there 12 months ago, but it's now suddenly becoming bread and butter, at least for us in New South Wales. And so it's about how do we observe these things, and again, how would it impact in other aspects of our lives, of our customers' lives? And is there some meaning to the use of that type of trend and technology that is going to help progress those organizations, my team, my organization, differently to the way that we need to think? And that then could be the next pivot opportunity to start exploring these new technologies, these new behavior that none of us would even think about 18 months ago.
And without disclosing any trade secrets, but in terms of trends that it might be publicly available and what you might reasonably expect, or as consumers we might reasonably expect to see, and perhaps even on the payments, on the QR side of things. I know that, and I called an Uber the other day, and the gentleman was of Chinese origin. He was talking about payments at the time, and he said, when I was back in China 2 years ago, he said, I was just so surprised at how far advanced they were with their payment system. In that, he gave a number of examples, but one was, he said, look, it's virtually cashless, and to the person that might be asking you for money on the street, he or she is using a QR code. They're using their phone. There is no request for money anymore. So when I think about where that economy is and how far advanced it is relative to Australia, what are some of those learnings and opportunities now overlaid with the pandemic in terms of these behavioural observations you guys are making? What do you think we could reasonably expect to see?
Well, we can definitely reasonably expect to see QR codes coming into the land of payments for Australia. Last week, FPOS, which is our domestic scheme, has just announced the availability of that QR code to actually add another element of how easy it would be for consumers to conduct commerce, to buy stuff online, offline. So that's very much following and learning from the model that has occurred in China over the last 5-6 years where they have, over time turned from a complete cash-based society, bypass the whole era of credit cards to a complete digital QR code, digital economy in terms of the way that commerce are conducted. How the starting point was based on some of the WeChat stories that we read about is many years ago, in the Chinese culture, whenever there's the Chinese New Year, you kind of put money in the red pocket envelope and you give it to the younger kids or the single unmarried couples or people, sorry. And it was then kind of like, well, but there are so many students overseas studying, like they don't come home for Chinese New Year. So how do we actually give them that red pocket lucky money? And this is actually the first use case of how money was digitized in the ability to send the red envelope via WeChat. So that's one of the driving force of how, the Chinese economy is able to turn from cash into now complete digital, and all these mega apps that are within there is just amazing of how, to your point, people on the street who may be, challenged by life and they're, homeless, they just need to have a QR code and then they actually get donations or support in their account so that they can use the QR code to actually buy food, to buy clothing. And so that's definitely one technology payment trend that we can expect to see here in Australia. Now, whilst, habitually we're all very used to QR code for COVID check-ins and check-outs, it is still going to be competing with the payment behavior of contactless. I take out my card and I tap on the machine. I've tokenized my card on my, iPhone, and I can just kind of use my iPhone. There's Apple Pay that I can use when I'm shopping online on my phone. So all of these are just behaviors that we just need to give it time to land, see where the consumers are. It could be differentiated by age group, could be differentiated by demographics. And these are all the bets that we've got to have on where it does impact our business to see where this is going to go. And thus, just focusing on, everyone's just going to either use cash or everyone's just going to go back to using their credit card may not be the case anymore. But it's about the empirical evidence that we need to collect and observe over time to see where that landing may be.
That's so interesting. I did not know that about the red envelopes. That's the first time I've heard that. It's so interesting, isn't it? Because what I love about this show, because we're talking about technology and digital transformation, but so much of our conversation, Mick, is always about humans, right? Which is kind of the point, because digital transformation, we're talking about humans and behaviors and it's just, the technology is a big but small part of how you successfully, whatever the transformation is. Bron, I wanted to go back to something that you'd said, because again, there's so much in here. Like, I know everyone listening will be getting so much. I want to make this, so we've sort of talked through tech, trends, customers, leadership and teams. From a personal perspective, and obviously, for you, for us as leaders, as humans, when you think of pivot and maybe moments when you've pivoted in your career or had the courage to change something, is there anything, because I think it's a really important point for all those listening, that, okay, yep, I get I can make it feel safer for my team, but what about when you're sitting there and you're personally thinking, gosh, this feels a bit confronting or scary, or I don't know what's going to happen next, and getting that courage to do something? Can you share any of your thoughts, or maybe even your experiences around that personal courage to pivot yourself?
Yeah, look, it's always scary because, part of what's going through my mind would be, anticipating, part of my French, but like the oh shit moment. Like, what if that happens? What is that going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my team? How is it going to impact the customers? How is that going to impact the company? So there's always going to be that element of fear. And I think how I work through that is, it's very important to have mentors around you where you can reach out and just play out what you're thinking about. Because many a times when you talk about these fears, part of that process may overcome or may feel more comfortable about that fear because you've articulated it, you've thought about it, And then so it's kind of like, you know what? I think I can take that risk. And if XYZ happens, then I'll just change tack. I'll just need to pivot again. And if really the worst situation happens, then we just need to play out the scenario, what could be the worst? And then really assessing it, I guess, in a much more logical way is, how likely is that going to happen? And what would be the impact when that happens? And so this is then about the experimentation. This is about then, not throwing all your investment into that one idea. And, I think some of the things that we've touched upon last time is kind of the proof of concept. How do you start small? How do you actually do incremental so that there isn't as much risk? But giving yourself the comfort that you've thought about it, you've bounced it off others in terms of your mentors around the network. You kind of compare, hey, actually, has that happened in another company, or is that happening maybe overseas and someone else is also on that journey? A lot of it is actually finding confidence back in yourself that it is okay to create that unknown for you and for the team. But it is hard. It is scary. But we as leaders just need to learn the pattern of overcoming that fear. And I find that having the mentors in your life is very critical for that. And talking it out with somebody will always help you formulate even just a tighter narrative of how you can get your team on board. And then again, it's about asking them for input before you really, mobilize and go on to that direction.
A problem shared is a problem halved. No, I love that. I love that. We certainly believe in mentoring, and there's so much value to yield and to share something. I mean, Alex was theoretically my mentor for a number of years, so there's a first-hand example of yielding great benefit from having. Absolutely, I'll count myself very lucky, of course. Just on that point, and as you say, Bron, it can be daunting when you're contemplating that Kodak moment. Crudely again, an analogy, but there was a key moment in time, and obviously there's lead indicators, red flags along the way. How do you sufficiently de-risk yourself in that process of coming up to a key moment where we're looking at now? And I suppose to give you, obviously the landscape it's a major, arguably the greatest transformation we've seen from a digital perspective ever in our lives, and so market in terms of what financial services is going through. How do you help future-proof your company and your teams and yourself as those seemingly rapid transformations are happening and that could threaten the incumbents and their business models?
So for me, the approach is making sure that we've got time to take ourselves completely away from the business. I think, many teams and many organizations have offsite strategy days, and there is a real purpose to why we need to do that as leaders and as, teams and businesses. Because when you are kind of in the business every day, when you are dealing with the same numbers every day, it's very easy to become autopilot in just accepting how things are happening, particularly when things are going great, kind of like, what unfortunately led to the Kodak moment. Even though there were, signs, but the cash cow of the business back at that point was still doing so well that no one wanted to hear that noise about, oh, what if this happens? So I think, deliberately taking the time away from the business and deliberately talking about the what if. I love to do an exercise with my team where we dream about the what if, and it's usually what if this shit happens. And we run workshops. The world of payments, fraud is high on our radar. So we actually take time out from the business to think about, what if all these people are trying to defraud the bank? What would actually need to happen for that to occur? And do we have enough controls in place to detect and prevent? So these are the things that at different levels of the organization that we need to do. From a technology perspective, for example, what if quantum computing becomes the norm in the next 3 years' time? And then suddenly businesses are going to be under threat who haven't been as technology savvy or who hasn't been leveraging on technology, and suddenly they could lose their business overnight because of the power and the capability of what quantum computing is, able to bring onto a industry and the impact that it can have. So the what if scenario planning, having a deliberate day or, a few hours every quarter, every half a year to take the team purposely away from the business is one of the practices that I've got to ensure that we are giving ourselves that safe zone to hypothesize anything and everything that we have observed around us.
Scenario modeling and scenario plan, it's such a powerful tool, isn't it? Because it's as much everything you've said, taking time out, really using your imagination to test. And you just made me think, actually, when you're talking about that. I was talking to someone, a CEO the other day, who I think had seen some red flags in an organisation because the teams wanted to rush through that. They saw that as a waste of time, and can't we get through this workshop? And I just think you've just so well described it. Like, it's so easy to just see what's in front of you and get in the groove, and especially when things are going well. So I love that taking away and coming back. I've got one more question for you, because I know, as usual, it goes so fast, and then I'm sure, Mick, you'll have a final question as well. Kind of similar themes we've been talking about. I think backstage we were talking about, we've come back 2021. We all kind of hoped that, COVID would be done and dusted, door closed for 2020. Clearly not the case. And you've talked a lot about it, but I certainly feel, and a lot of the really senior people leaders that I speak to every day, I feel like as business leaders, we're in this new space, right? So hybrid teams, and we've touched on a lot of this, but for me, it feels like we haven't been here before. Like, this is very different from, having flexible work hours. It was almost like, when you were saying before, are we going to go back to those old behaviors of credit cards? And I have a feeling it's not going back. We're now faced with this reality. I'm just so interested in your reflections on how do you have that human connection and build teams and cultures and still have all that when it's probably highly likely that a majority of a workforce is never going to be in a physical office again at the same time, or you have more global employees than ever before. I just think it's a really interesting thing, and a lot of leaders seem to be really grappling with that. What's your thoughts on that? Is it different skills, different leadership styles? Do we need to think about different ways of leading?
I think it's a different everything. So I think step number one for all leaders and everyone is to accept the fact that we're not going back. I know we've kind of termed the new normal, but there's a little bit of that, the element of the new normal, as if we're going to go back to normal.
Yeah.
So I think the recognition and the bravery to actually confront that and talk about that is important as a team, right? Everyone is on the same page. We're recognizing we're not going back. So how do we move forward together? And I don't have the answer for that, because these are the things that I'm asking my team, because I need their input. But I think as you draw them into that conversation and that participation, it's again, solidifying that connection that you're trying to build with them. There would be things that's going to come about where, who knows, there's going to be that next platform that is able to really connect the people who are physically in the office and those who are on Zoom. I don't know, via virtual reality, who knows? But these are the elements that we just need to be brave enough to talk about it and not sweep it under the carpet and kind of go, oh, well, we'll just wait until what other companies are doing. We'll wait until what the government guidelines are and what the health guidelines are. They are important inputs, but they are not necessarily like the instruction sheet that you need to follow, because they don't have the answers for what you need for your team and for your company. So recognition and acknowledgement, number one. Embracing everyone to participate, to work out how to create that culture, both online, offline. Everyone has a say, because what makes a great culture is the components of every individual in that team, in that organization. It's not a top down and say, ta-da, here's our little poster about what our culture is about. If people don't believe it, if people don't act in it, there's no culture. It sounds good, maybe, but it's an empty shell behind that. So I think those are the elements that I am practicing with my team. But unfortunately, I don't have the answer yet to what this is going to be like for, here and into the future. But keeping open mind, continuous conversation with the team is a critical element to how we find that new future.
And conscious of time. I was just say, I love that you say I don't know, because I think that's kind of the point. We haven't been here before. Mick, over to you.
Now, final question, because there's so many more things we'd love to ask, but we're out of time, which is not a surprise because it's been a gripping discussion and wonderful insights on this very notion, though, of uncertainty and not knowing and being able to deal in grey, so to speak. And this was really the question that Collins asked in Good to Great and Great by Choice is, why is it that some companies are able to outperform with exactly the same level of chaos and uncertainty in the market relative to their peers? As that, I'll leave you with that question, maybe some insight you can share to our audience and ourselves, listening. What advice do you give to leaders, dealing in grey, so to speak?
So mindset for me is very important. Mindset of being okay to tell the team, I don't know, but let's work on it together, is what for me differentiates companies that would be successful dealing with the same level of chaos to companies that are not able to survive through the same level of chaos. Leaders don't know everything, and we need to be comfortable to park whatever ego we may or may not have so far outside the door that when we are talking to the team that we just say we don't know, and actually be okay and be proud that we don't know. And I think that's one element, because the gray, no one knows what's, is it a dark shade of gray? Is it a light shade of gray? Who knows? Is it going to turn black, or is it going to turn white? Or actually, is it going to turn pink? No one knows, but it's about knowing that we don't know. It's about giving the confidence for the team that they don't need to know either, but it's that culture of working together, collaborating the way that we need to navigate the unknown. Now, there are going to be team members that don't work well in the gray, and it's about then identifying who they are and having almost that deeper connection with them to understand how you can support them through that gray. And there would be some people that love living in the gray. And so you just need to balance those two sides of your team, that those who are too passionate about the gray don't run too fast, because they need to be mindful of those who are not going to be comfortable with the gray. So that's kind of how I approach it as a leader. And I think for those companies, it's about the mindset. Are we okay to not know about the gray? Companies that always want to find every single answer, either they're going to be wasting resources or they're going to go down a rabbit hole. And next thing they know, years from now, to find out that, oh my God, we're now kind of deep in this rabbit hole. How are we going to climb out? Are usually the ones that may not have a bright future.
So good. I wish we could keep going. We're already out of time. So thank you so much. I'm laughing because I'm feeling like I've written so many notes. So thank you, Bron. Mick, sorry I kind of grilled you a little bit today as well. But I reckon this is such a powerful conversation. And for all of you listening, I reckon this is a rewatch, this one, absolutely, because there is so much insight in here, whether it's pivoting around tech, people, hearing your customers, making space for your team. I love your comments on culture as well, Bron. Someone said to me the other day, we're rolling out culture from top down. I'm like, well, kind of know where that's going to end. So, yeah, good luck, because, it's humans, and I think you're right. It's not the new normal, it's the new. And I love that you've called out that in all of this, it's listening and being aware and being okay not to have all the answers. Thank you so much. Thanks, Mick. Fabulous co-host, as always. Thank you all for joining us on yet another fabulous show of Digital First, the Banking Transformation Series, where we cover everything, technology, digital, and humans. Who would have thought? Thanks, everyone. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again.